A massive injection of cash for schools, hospitals and transport. The Chancellor says we can afford it. He's accused of spending unwisely. Schools get the biggest share, an extra £12 billion. In Sussex, police confirmed the young girl's body was Sarah Payne's. It's official, Charles has no intention of marrying Mrs. Parker Bowles.
Also tonight, as the race to become SNP leader starts, MSP Alex Neil is the first to declare he wants to succeed Alex Salmond. And will a bizarre wrist injury scupper Paul Laurie's chances of defending his open crown?
Good evening. Schools, hospitals and transport are the big winners in the massive spending spree announced by the Chancellor today. Gordon Brown is investing an extra £43 billion in essential public services. And these are the highlights of Mr. Brown's comprehensive spending review. Education gets the lion's share with £12 billion over 3 years. Transport schemes get a boost of £4.2 billion. And we were told, of course, a few months ago that the Health Service would be getting an extra £13 billion. Where all that health money goes will be announced next week. Mr. Brown said we could afford all the extra spending because the economy was in good shape and lots of government debt had been repaid. But the Tories said the money was being spent unwisely and it would lead to even higher taxes. This first report this evening is from our correspondent, John Pienaar.
This was Gordon Brown's day. The Iron Chancellor was about to show his softer side, out to show he could care for public services and afford to pay the bills. In the Commons, he peppered his big statement with the catchphrase, prudence. But there was no doubt that this time he was in a giving mood.
Extra resources that are now available to us, not at the expense of prudence, but because of our prudence.
But this government has gained a reputation for spin. Every fact is turned to advantage. This statement wasn't meant to be about spin, even if the Chancellor seemed at one moment to have the word on the brain.
So I have 3 policy announcements to underpin the strength, underpin the strength of our public finances.
He got it right in the end, and there were plenty of big announcements. The billions for health had been well trailed. Education was the other big winner.
The best education for all, from early learning to lifelong learning, is not only a time-honoured social ideal. In today's world, it's an absolute economic necessity.
6.2 billion. In the press gallery, the announcements came almost too fast for the newswires to keep up. There'd be a 10-year plan for transport, help for deprived areas, a boost for law and order, and more than expected for defence, from a government that's anxious to show it's protecting national interests.
Madam Speaker, we have made our choice. Improved investment in health, education, transport, social services and in our communities. It is now for those who oppose our spending plans to state clearly where their cuts would fall.
His Tory counterpart had other ideas today, but when he started, Labour MPs thought he was coming down against public spending on principle.
Madam Speaker, I believe that the level of public spending is no longer the best measure of the effectiveness of government. I was quoting from the Labour Party manifesto.
His point was that Labour was suddenly spending out of control. It wouldn't work and the taxpayers would suffer in the end.
A Conservative government will tax less. A Conservative government will spend better. And a Conservative government will show common sense and prudence.
The Lib Dems are sceptical about the true value of today's generosity.
Well, by holding money back for 2 years, the government have damaged morale and wasted resources. So they now have to put much more money in just to get back to where we started.
Across the UK, cash from Europe has been unlocked today. The government has agreed to match EU funds for business projects like this one in Carmarthen. Nationalists are pleased, but not too pleased.
There is more money for match funding there, and we welcome that movement. But we think it's seriously short of the full sum we need. We think it's only about 50% there.
I think he's got a big credibility gap to get over and actually has to deliver real services on the ground rather than just lots of nothings on a glossy policy document.
So the political argument's clear and there's a familiar ring to it. Labour's offering more cash for public services, only this time they say they can afford it without putting up taxes. The Tories are the party of tax cuts. The parties are in position for an election campaign that seems to have started already. John Pienaar, BBC News, Westminster.
As John was saying there, the investment being poured into schools was expected to be substantial. But the scale, in fact, took everyone by surprise. Education takes more than a quarter of the extra spending. Total spending will rise by £12 billion over 3 years. There'll be much more cash paid directly to head teachers. Primary schools will get up to £20,000 extra every year for the next 3 years. Secondary schools will get as much as £70,000 a year, as Mike Baker now reports.
Alors, qu'est-ce que tu fais comme loisir?
Over the next 3 years, schools like Kendrick Girls in Reading should be £370 per pupil better off. That's a really significant increase, making education today's big winner, although it still leaves schools like this worse off than neighbouring private schools. Particularly welcome is the extra money that will go directly to head teachers rather than to local education authorities. For Kendrick, that's worth around £60,000 extra next year.
That's absolutely excellent, and I think that's the way it should be, and I think that's the way for the future. We were delighted when we got the 40,000 last time. It came directly to us. We had to wait a while, mind you, but when we got it, it made a lot of difference. I think it should come directly to the head teachers, the professionals who, working with their governors, know what their own priorities are and can spend them on their own priorities.
Giving more money directly to schools will please head teachers, but it's a further blow to the local councils who believe they, not central government, are best placed to decide how to distribute money to schools. But despite that, the Chancellor promised that direct payments would continue every year for the next 4 years. But there's a price to pay. Eventually, schools will have to meet even tougher targets for test results at age 11, 14 and at GCSE. Kendrick School's neighbour, Reading University, also needs more money for staff and equipment. But universities aren't getting as much as schools. Their increase is under 5%, with much of that earmarked to stop the brain drain of research staff.
It's not a vast amount of money, and if you were to spread it around evenly, it would not make much impact on university budgets at all, and it wouldn't address some of the key issues related to the physical fabric of universities, or indeed to issues of staffing levels generally.
Both of us are self-catered, so when it came to food...
University taster schemes like this one, designed to inspire students from comprehensives to apply, will also get a boost. After his attack on Oxford's failure to admit comprehensive pupil Laura Spence, the Chancellor is dangling a carrot worth up to £20 million to encourage universities to broaden the social mix of their students. Mike Baker, BBC News.
Over the past few months, ministers have been widely condemned for failing to improve transport. They've now decided to double the investment over the next 3 years. There'll be more details from John Prescott, the Deputy Prime Minister, on Thursday, but today's news included the following. Money for rural transport to rise from 60 to 95 million, a promise to spend more to tackle road congestion and improve the frequency and the quality of buses and trains. Well, Sian Williams reports now from Birmingham on the transport story.
Another delayed train into New Street Station. This is the much derided West Coast Main Line. It's more congested here than anywhere else in Europe. Nearly 1,000 trains pass through every day. But there are too many commuters and not enough stock, and the tracks and signals are outdated, causing overcrowding and long delays.
You just put up with it, don't you? It's unfortunate for some people, I suppose, but such as myself here, we're quite happy to go along, you know.
I usually travel with coach, actually, but it was through a friend that I actually went on the train, so I won't be doing it again.
And the motorways aren't much better. This is the M6, again, one of the worst bottlenecks in Europe. Here they're planning the country's first privately run relief road, which drivers have to pay to use. It'll be watched closely before any decision on imposing motorway tolls elsewhere. Today's money will help to relieve congestion. The AA says it's about time.
It will help relieve bottlenecks such as the M6 and the M5. It'll help a bypass programme to take traffic out of local communities, and it will provide proper maintenance of our roads so we don't have them crumbling as they are now. So it looks, on the face of it, very good news for motorists and road users generally.
This new tram system in Birmingham has got nearly 20% of people out of their cars. The government wants to see more of these in city centres. Leeds and Portsmouth could be next. But they're expensive and building them takes time. Ministers have to hope the public has the patience to wait. Well, I'm joined here at New Street Station by Rob Donald. You coordinate public transport across the West Midlands. We were hearing big numbers from the Chancellor today. Do you think it's going to be enough to make a difference?
it's good to see big steps in the right direction, but we do need even more money in the years after this 3-year programme. In the West Midlands alone, we need £3 to £4 billion just to unblock the rail system here locally and also expand the Midland Metro Light Rail system as a success across all of the West Midlands.
Now, it's going to take a lot to convince people to leave their cars at home, isn't it? I mean, do you think it can actually be done? Can we change the culture?
Oh yes, I mean, we're doing that already, and that's why it's important to invest particularly in trains and in light rail systems. They have that proven ability to actually attract motorists out of their cars. We are taking hundreds of thousands of cars off the roads in the West Midlands, but we need more of that investment and expand it, as I say, across the whole conurbation. That's vital for the local economy and the national economy.
Well, we'll hear more details about exactly what he's going to do on Thursday. Rob Donald, thanks very much. And now it's back to you, Hugh.
Sian, many thanks. Let's just have a look at some of the other schemes that got more money today. They are these. The police get more cash, part of the Home Office budget, which rises to £10.6 billion by 2004, and an extra £316 million will be spent on the police service in Northern Ireland. Defence gets a boost to nearly £25 billion by 2004. Money for agriculture rises to £1.35 billion in 4 years. Mr Brown also announced the National Children's Fund with a budget of £450 million to help vulnerable children. And the BBC World Service gets a boost from £174 million this year to £210 million in 2004. We'll have some more analysis a little later for you. Let's have the day's other news now. Police in Sussex have confirmed that the body of a young girl found yesterday is that of 8-year-old Sarah Payne. They've now launched a murder inquiry. Sarah's body was found in a field some 12 miles from where she disappeared over 2 weeks ago. This report from our correspondent, Robert Hall.
They came on shift to the worst possible news. Many of these officers had begun to accept the inevitable, but the announcement, when it came, was a blow to everyone who has followed the inquiry.
We have been able to identify that the body in the field half a mile from here is Sarah Payne's. I would suggest at this stage, bearing in mind I'm mindful of the fact that a number of you have been here throughout this inquiry, I would take perhaps the slightly unusual step of suggesting we observe a few seconds silence in respect for her and also her family. And that includes the photographers.
Now begins an intensified hunt, not for a kidnapper, but for a killer. The inquiry teams are scouring farmland for items of Sarah's clothing, appealing for help in finding her blue dress and black shoes, which may have been discarded some distance away. Sarah's parents have paid a brief visit to the scene. They asked that it be kept private. But the growing number of tributes can have left them in no doubt as to the support offered in this county and beyond. At Sarah's Surrey school, shock and disbelief. Her head teacher had broken the news to her friends.
Devastated is the word. We've been preparing for it for 2 weeks, but there's still so many of them are so upset. It was almost unbelievable, more than we even expected.
It is a difficult time for all concerned with the murder hunt, but their search is narrowing. There's a belief that the person responsible may be within their own county boundary.
Robert, what is the progress being made, if any, by police at the moment?
Well, reasonably speedy progress here, Hugh. The search operation is still being carried out up the farm track behind me. That's where it has been centred. Sarah's body was found behind the hedge, hidden from the road. Now, the road will play a big part in inquiries from now on. It's been reopened, as you can see. And there's a belief that drivers here on that weekend, the first weekend in July, may well have seen something. It was probably dark at the time. It may have been something that they wouldn't have even remarked on, a vehicle moving, individuals in this track or moving on the road. Police are asking them tonight to come forward. And alongside the road, if they needed a reminder of what took place here, the floral tributes are mounting up. Mike and Sarah Payne saw just a few when they came just before lunch. Now the line is growing by the hour. There's a tremendous strength of feeling in this rural area, and it is that strength of feeling the police hope will provoke a witness to come forward and give them the lead, which could take this inquiry to a speedy end. Hugh.
Robert, many thanks. It's the last day of peace talks between Israelis and Palestinians at Camp David near Washington. Israel's Prime Minister Ehud Barak and the Palestinian leader Yasser Arafat have been meeting for a week with President Clinton. Sources close to the talks say the status of Jerusalem is dominating the discussions. But with Mr. Clinton planning to leave tomorrow for an international summit in Japan, pressure is on to get some kind of agreement tonight. Hundreds of heart patients are being advised to get in touch with their GPs because a surgeon who operated on them has the hepatitis B virus. The doctor worked at Aberdeen Royal Infirmary, the Cottingham and Castle Hill hospitals in Hull, and Broad Green Cardiothoracic Centre in Liverpool. Now, today's promise of more money for policing came as the latest figures showed a sharp rise in crime, especially robberies and offences involving violence in England and Wales. This report now from our correspondent, John Silverman.
The night patrol in Barnsley. Here as elsewhere, there's concern about the rise in crimes of violence. In South Yorkshire, up 14%. Closed-circuit television means a greater proportion of street crime is being reported, with mobile phones a common target for theft.
It's young people on young people who are both perpetrators and victims, mostly in our town centres around places of public entertainment. That's where we're seeing the pattern increasing.
More youngsters on the streets, more items to steal, alcohol to fuel aggression. Some of the reasons why the crime figures are rising. And for a town the size of Barnsley, only 13 police officers on shift tonight. More officers on the beat should be one of the most visible effects of the Chancellor's spending review. But the government is worried that some forces are less efficient at tackling crime than others.
Lancashire, Humberside, Northumbria, Kent, crime down significantly. Other areas, typically big metropolitan areas, crime going up.
But what do you expect when we've got 2,500 fewer police, and we've got a system which lets prisoners out of jail, including violent prisoners, in less than half their sentence?
Graham Dixon had his skull fractured outside a pub in Sheffield. Lack of witnesses meant that his attacker was never prosecuted.
You don't realise how ill you've been at the time, and then suddenly it's all there following you, and so the depression becomes so severe that you then can't do anything.
A 5-year plan to cut city robberies by 14% will be a new test of police efficiency. John Silverman, BBC News, South Yorkshire.
Time is 17 minutes past 6. In a few moments, save the porpoise. Thousands are being killed in the fishermen's nets. The world's best gets ready for the British Open at St Andrews.
And in 15 minutes, all Scotland's top stories, sport, a full weather forecast, and a study into rare birds that could put Scottish mining jobs in jeopardy. Plus, sun and sand as the International Sand Sculpture Festival comes to Glasgow.
Prince Charles has no intention of marrying Camilla Parker Bowles. His office issued a statement after a newspaper report that they were planning a wedding in Scotland. St James's Palace has made an official complaint about that article, as our royal correspondent Jenny Bond now reports.
Prince Charles, attending a graduation ceremony in Swansea today, has become increasingly annoyed by the speculation about whether he'll marry Camilla Parker Bowles. In the past, he's complained about stories concerning his sons. Now, for the first time, he's decided to complain on his own behalf. The intention is to make it crystal clear that there is to be no wedding. It was after his recent stay in Scotland, when he was joined by Mrs. Parker Bowles, that the Sunday Times story appeared. It claimed that there had been secret discussions between the Prince's staff and the Church of Scotland about the implications of a wedding there. The Prince's private secretary, Stephen Lamport, has now written to the Press Complaints Commission, saying, "I should like to make it clear that there is no truth whatsoever to the story, and I should be very grateful if you would investigate this misleading report." In a statement this afternoon, the Sunday Times said its information had been supplied by a source close to one of the Queen's chaplains. Full consideration will be given to the complaint, and we will respond in due course. The Prince and Mrs. Parker Bowles have largely achieved what they wanted, the freedom to be together without causing a sensation every time. But she remains adamant that she doesn't want a public role.
And she'll be with the Prince again in Wales later this week, though she'll stay very much in the background.
His hope is that by lodging this formal complaint, he can finally convince the press and the public that, as things stand, neither he nor Mrs. Parker Bowles has any intention or indeed desire to get married. Jenny Bond, BBC News at St James's Palace.
The only English soccer fan jailed during the Euro 2000 Championships has been freed from jail in Brussels. 33-year-old Mark Forrester was convicted of assaulting a police officer. He's been told he can be released until an appeal hearing later this year. The porpoise is under threat. The RSPCA has sounded a clear warning after claims that thousands die every year after being caught in nets used to fish hake and cod. The fishing industry says the claims are exaggerated.
They're secretive and shy. A smaller cousin of the dolphin, they usually come to the surface only when they need to breathe. No one knows how many harbour porpoises there are around the UK. Most are found in lesser used seas off Scotland and the West Country. But they're declining in numbers, and government scientists and conservationists blame fishing nets. Vessels from Denmark and the UK use fine nylon gill nets to catch cod and hake. Some are 300 miles long. They're left on the seabed where the porpoise hunting for food gets trapped. The RSPCA says they die a slow, cruel death, unable to breathe, cut by the nets as they try to escape.
There's too much gill net in the water catching too many porpoises each year. What we need to see is either a change away from that fishing method into alternatives or a modification of that.
Fishermen say a ban on gill nets would damage their industry. They deny killing thousands of porpoises and say many nets have escape routes.
They are working windows to allow the mammals through. There's no benefit for fishermen to catch a porpoise. It's not worth any money. It damages expensive nets and it reduces fishing time. It's in everybody's interest that they run free.
Ministers believe 20,000 porpoises could have died in nets in the last 6 years. They say they're looking for ways to better protect them. Margaret Gilmore, BBC News.
The Queen has opened the new British Embassy in the German capital, Berlin. The building is on the site of the old embassy, which was abandoned by Britain in 1939 and destroyed during the Second World War. It's the first time a British monarch has opened an embassy. The Lawn Tennis Association has parted company with its director of tennis, Richard Lewis. His departure follows the humiliating Davis Cup defeat by Ecuador last weekend, which saw Great Britain drop out of the world's top 16 tennis nations. Tiger Woods has been practicing at St Andrews, where the Open starts on Thursday. He's the world's best golfer, just in case you weren't aware. He's aiming to become the youngest ever player to win all 4 major golf titles. More than that, he's proving to be a remarkable role model, as Neil Bennett now explains.
The only black golfer to win a major championship is on a mission at St Andrews, not just to complete the set, but to bring golf to minority communities who've never experienced what it has to offer.
They've been denied access into the game, and I think that's wrong, because anyone who wants to play the great game of golf should have the opportunity to play the great game of golf. That's not necessarily the case.
Coaching schemes like this one in Essex are proof that the Tiger Woods effect is real and that golf is shedding its image as an old man's game.
He's young himself and he's like the best golfer in the world, so I think he must have attracted more people to come and play golf.
Yasin Ali is one of the new breed of golfers. Born in Kenya, he's in the England under-18 team and he believes golf is changing.
A very good few years ago it was a white man's sport, but yeah, Tiger Woods has broken down those barriers. You know, if you see it now, you have so many Asians, blacks, lots of people from different ethnic backgrounds playing golf, and it's just wonderful to watch, you know.
But to mine the rich seam of potential talent, golf clubs, overwhelmingly white and middle-aged, have to play their part.
It's very much, I think, a process of educating club members. They're the people who've got to make people welcome into their clubs. It's no good us saying you must admit everybody into your clubs, because we have no authority to do that.
Tiger Woods has already raised the game of golf to a new level. Inspiring a whole new generation of golfers could prove just as significant as any of his championship victories. Neil Bennett, BBC News at St Andrews.
And more now on today's main story, the big spending plans announced by the Chancellor. Education gets £12 billion over the next 3 years, transport gets £4.2 billion, and the NHS was already due to get a £13 billion rise. So let's take the temperature in the city with Marion Bell of the Royal Bank of Scotland, and in Downing Street with our political editor, Robin Oakley. Marion, the Tories say this is a spending splurge. Is the city nervous about this so-called splurge?
No, it isn't, because the big numbers were already known, and in fact it had got a little bit nervous coming up to the announcement, so if anything there was some relief and positive reception. The overall numbers have been known since budget time, so really the city was not concerned.
And what about the fears again raised by some Conservatives about this leading to higher taxes? Where do you think that sits?
Well, it shouldn't lead to higher taxes if the Chancellor's done his sums right, because these spending plans are consistent with the overall fiscal pledges of borrowing only to invest over the cycle and keeping the burden of debt at a stable and prudent level. But it all is very dependent on whether he's got his sums right, and that in turn is a function of whether the current good state of the public finances is sustainable or not. The Treasury believes it is.
Marion, thanks a lot. Over to Downing Street. Robin, this perception problem that the government itself admits it has in some areas, do you think that people now will begin to believe that the government is putting in more money into these services and that they'll see some results?
Well, they have got a barrier of cynicism to surmount, Hugh, because the problem is they've announced big spending plans before, and they've announced them before the money's come on stream and before people have seen any effect in their local schools and hospitals. Now they're asking the public really to take them on trust again, and just after we've had the leaking of a memo from the Prime Minister showing a government very much concerned with its image, it's quite a big leap of faith that people will have to take. But the Chancellor's authority should see them through. He is a commanding figure in the Commons, even if he does leave us feeling as though we've been hit over the head with a wet sock full of statistics.
Indeed, Robin. Can we separate out the issue of the election, the coming election, from all of this?
Yes, I think we're seeing the parties, in a way, reverting somewhat to traditional patterns, Hugh, because the Tories are putting all the emphasis now on tax cuts. They're saying Labour is trying to spend too much, could put the economy at risk. They will be more careful. That enables them to present themselves once again as a tax-cutting party. Labour, having run a very tight economy for a couple of years and now having money to spend, is revelling in being able to please its traditional supporters in the Labour heartlands, saying they are now the spending party and can be trusted to look after the public services in a way they say the Tories can't.
OK, Robin, in Downing Street, thank you very much for that. Oh, a lovely day when I came in today. Is it going to be the same tomorrow, John?
Not bad at all, Hugh, actually. Yeah, a bit of a landmark today. You know, our temperature symbols go from yellow to red once we get to 25 degrees Celsius. Today we've reached 25 degrees Celsius in West London and also in Worcester. And we're going to repeat that tomorrow as well in some other southern parts of the country, up across the South Midlands and also to the west of London, probably. So plenty of warm sunshine to come, especially across England and Wales. Always more cloud for Scotland and for Northern Ireland too. But the outlook's still very promising, although there will be a risk of some thundery downpours coming along over the weekend. At the moment, though, it's still very much up in the air, literally, I suppose you could say. We aren't sure about the details just at the moment. Now, what we have just now is a large anticyclone sitting over the country. That means to say the winds go around in that sort of direction, clockwise manner. Light winds coming up for the Gulf, incidentally, at St Andrews, but some brisker easterly winds perhaps developing down here across the south in a few days' time as those thundery showers perhaps begin to show their hand. So some mist around first thing in the morning, some fog around these coasts as well through the Irish Sea into northwest England and Wales, and always more cloud, as I say, through Northern Ireland and up into the western north of Scotland, perhaps giving some drizzle here, but there should be some sunshine here and there. But there's no doubt the brightest sunshine tomorrow is going to be down across more central and southwestern parts of England and Wales, with temperatures here reaching 24, possibly 25 degrees, refreshing breezes though again developing around the coast. And more from the regions in the next half an hour, Hugh.
We are encouraged, John. Thank you very much. Now it's nearly 6:30. There'll be another update, of course, as usual, just before 7 o'clock. In a moment, though, it's time to join the BBC's news teams across the United Kingdom. Bye for now.